Welcome, dear viewers, to a journey into one of the most enchanting legends in human history, the story of King Arthur. This isn't just a tale of swords and sorcery, but a deeply human saga of bravery, loyalty, betrayal, and the pursuit of honor. In this video series, you'll travel back to the misty landscapes of ancient Britain, where noble knights ride out under banners of courage, where castles rise from fog-draped hills, and where destiny is shaped by the swing of a sword and the whisper of prophecy. You'll meet King Arthur, a humble boy destined for greatness, his loyal companion Sir Lancelot, the wise Merlin the wizard, the fair Queen Guinevere, and many more legends of the Round Table. Each chapter unfolds a new adventure, from the miraculous pulling of the sword from the stone to the quest for the Holy Grail, all brought to life with immersive storytelling and visuals crafted just for you. So grab a warm blanket, get comfortable, and let your imagination gallop through time. Welcome to Camelot. Welcome to the legend. Welcome to the story of King Arthur in the heart of a divided Britain, where rival kings battled for power and the land was drowning in lawlessness. A prophecy stirred in hushed tones across taverns and courts. It spoke of a boy, unknown and unknowing, destined to unite the realm. In the city of Londinium, on a frosty winter morning, a mysterious stone appeared in the courtyard of the great cathedral. Embedded deep within it was a sword, glimmering with runes, its hilt bearing the inscription, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone is the true-born king of all Britain." Noblemen, knights and lords from across the land tried their hand. One after another failed, their pride dented and their dreams dashed. Months passed, and the stone became more spectacle than hope. Until a young squire named Arthur arrived. He wasn't even there for the sword. Sent by his foster brother, Sir Kay, to fetch a weapon, Arthur stumbled upon the stone and casually gripped the hilt. To the astonishment of all, the blade slid free with effortless grace. The crowd gasped. The air thickened with disbelief. Some shouted trickery. Others fell silent, awe in their eyes. And thus, with no army, no title, and no claim but destiny, Arthur Pendragon began his path to legend. The moment Arthur pulled the sword from the stone, the wheels of fate turned. Yet, not all hearts welcomed the boy king. Whispers spread through the noble courts: a peasant? A bastard? And rebellion simmered beneath jeweled crowns. Though the archbishop declared Arthur the rightful heir, many barons refused to bend the knee. Arthur returned to his modest home, dazed by the commotion. His foster father, Sir Ector, gently revealed the truth. Arthur was not his by blood. Years ago, a cloaked man had brought the infant to Ector's doorstep, demanding he be raised in secret. That man, Ector said, was Merlin the wizard, a being of immense power who served the land's mysterious will. Soon after, Merlin appeared again, just as the prophecy had foretold. Clad in a cloak of stars and mist, he explained that Arthur was the son of Uther Pendragon, the last High King, born of royal blood and ancient magic. His fate had been hidden to protect him from assassins and the greed of men. As the truth unfurled, Arthur stood silent. He was no longer just a squire. He was the hope of a fractured realm. And though his hands trembled, he knew what he must become: a leader, a symbol, a king. But first, he would need allies, and trust was not easily won. Thus began Arthur's journey, not just to rule, but to earn the right to rule. As Britain murmured with disbelief and resistance, the one figure who could silence doubt returned: Merlin, the enigmatic wizard who seemed as old as the hills and as wise as the stars. Cloaked in robes woven with constellations, his eyes shimmered with knowledge too ancient, for mortal minds. He appeared before the court at the cathedral, where barons and bishops still debated Arthur's right to rule. With a thunderclap that silenced the room, Merlin stepped forward and lifted his staff. He told them the tale of Uther Pendragon, the last High King, and how he had fallen in love with Queen Igraine of Cornwall. Their union, born in secrecy and sealed by magic, had produced a son, Arthur. To protect the infant from Uther's enemies, Merlin spirited him away and placed him in the care of Sir Ector, knowing one day the boy would return to claim the throne. The nobles grumbled, skeptical still, but when Merlin conjured visions in the air, glimpses of Uther, the infant Arthur, the sword in the stone, truth wrapped itself around the hearts of even the most hardened men. Still, Merlin warned, Arthur is the king not just by blood but by heart. He must prove himself worthy in deeds, not just lineage. With that, the court was divided no longer. Arthur was crowned by the archbishop, and Britain had a king again. Not of conquest, but of destiny. Yet the challenges were far from over. From the shadows of distant castles, enemies stirred. Jealous lords and foreign invaders saw opportunity in the boy king. But Arthur, guided by Merlin, would not waver. The boy was now a crowned king. And the legend had truly begun. No sooner had Arthur been crowned than rebellion echoed across the kingdom. Many barons still refused to serve a youth they once scorned as a stable boy. Chief among them was King Lot of Orkney, a fierce warlord with blood in his eyes and ambition in his heart. He gathered other disgruntled lords, and together they raised a host to march upon the newly crowned king. Arthur, still barely more than a boy, stood at the walls of Camelot, his heart pounding not with fear, but with resolve. Merlin, ever the guide, warned him, this battle is not to win the throne, but to prove you deserve it. Sir Ector and Sir Kay stood by his side, loyal and ready. The two armies clashed at dawn. Arthur led from the front, his sword flashing with righteous fury. Though untested, he fought with a fire born of destiny, cutting through enemy ranks with the grace of one touched by magic. Yet the battle was brutal. Blood painted the fields, and Arthur was wounded. But in the darkest moment, Merlin unleashed a storm of illusion, scattering enemy ranks with fear and confusion. The tide turned. King Lot retreated, humbled but not yet defeated. Victory was Arthur's. Though battered, he had proven himself not just a figurehead, but a warrior king. The men who had doubted him now knelt in loyalty. Songs of the boy who fought with heart and steel began to stir among the people. Arthur had passed his first trial. More would come, fiercer and darker. But on that battlefield, a kingdom began to believe. After the brutal clash at Camelot, Arthur sat beneath the grey skies, exhausted and aching. His sword, the blade he had pulled from the stone, lay shattered. Though he had won the battle, the cost was steep, and doubt still gnawed at the edge of his mind. Seeing his sorrow, Merlin spoke softly. One sword breaks, another awaits. He led Arthur into the enchanted forest of Brocéliande, where time moved strangely, and the trees whispered forgotten songs. At the forest's heart lay a shimmering lake, still and silver under a pale sky. There, without warning, the surface rippled, and a white arm rose from the depths, holding aloft a sword unlike any Arthur had seen. Then came the Lady of the Lake, gliding over the water like a dream. She was not quite mortal, her face serene, her eyes ancient. "This is Excalibur," she said, "forged not by men, but by Fae. Its scabbard protects the body, its blade protects the realm." Arthur took the sword, and the moment he grasped it, he felt a surge, not of brute power, but of solemn response. The blade shimmered with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "This is not a gift," Merlin warned. "It is a promise to rule with justice, not might." Arthur bowed to the Lady of the Lake. She faded into mist, and the lake returned to silence. When Arthur returned to his men bearing Excalibur, none questioned his place, for in his hands was not just a weapon, but a symbol. The king who bore it was no longer just a boy. He was a legend in the making, with Excalibur at his side, and loyalty beginning to grow among the nobles. Arthur faced his next challenge, not of war, but of leadership. Britain was fractured by centuries of rivalry. Barons ruled as petty kings, and old grudges poisoned the land. If Arthur was to unite the kingdom, he needed more than a throne. He needed fellowship, honor, and shared purpose. Merlin, ever wise, advised the young king to build something new, a council of equals. "Not one to rule all, but many to rule wisely," he said. And so Arthur founded the Round Table, a great circular table in the hall of Camelot, where no seat was higher than another. It would be a symbol of unity, where knights sat not for power, but for justice. The first knights were chosen not for their birth, but for their deeds. Among them were brave warriors like Sir Gawain, fierce defenders like Sir Bedivere, and noble protectors like Sir Percival. Each swore an oath to protect the weak, uphold truth, and seek peace. As word spread, others came to Camelot, not to challenge Arthur, but to join him. Camelot grew from a castle into a court of legend, a beacon in a darkened land. For the first time in generations, Britain began to heal. The people had not just a king, but knights who served a higher code, and a vision that offered hope. Yet even as Camelot bloomed, distant storms gathered. Peace, after all, is never permanent. But in that golden dawn, the Round Table rose, and the world took notice. Word of Arthur's wisdom and the shining glory of the Round Table spread beyond Britain's shores. From across the sea, in the land of Gaul, came a knight whose name would echo through the ages, Lancelot du Lac. Raised by the Lady of the Lake in a realm between worlds, Lancelot was more than a swordsman. He was a paragon of chivalry, grace, and unmatched skill. He arrived at Camelot clad in silver armor, bearing a lion-emblazoned shield and a quiet confidence. Many at court doubted him. After all, what need had Camelot for a foreign knight? But Lancelot offered no boast, only a challenge, to face any who would test his right to serve Arthur. One by one, the king's finest knights stepped forth, and one by one they were bested. Not humiliated, but honored by his skill and humility. Arthur, watching from his throne, recognized something deeper in the man, not just strength, but nobility of spirit. He welcomed Lancelot to the Round Table, granting him a seat of high regard. That same day, Lancelot laid eyes upon Queen Guinevere, and in that fleeting glance, fate trembled. Though nothing was spoken, a silent bond was formed, one that would bless and doom them both in time. For now, Lancelot served loyally, his sword a shield for Arthur and his ideals. Side by side with his brothers in arms, he defended the kingdom with unmatched courage. With each night added, the Round Table grew stronger. But even in times of peace, destiny weaves shadows. Lancelot had arrived, and the legend deepened. In the flowering days of Arthur's reign, peace blossomed across the kingdom, with the Round Table's knights upholding justice and Merlin's wisdom guiding the throne. The land knew a golden season. But no court was complete without a queen, and Arthur's heart had long been set upon one, Lady Guinevere, daughter of King Leodegrance of Camelot. Guinevere was not just beautiful. Though her golden hair and emerald eyes were praised in song, she was intelligent, poised, and courageous. When Arthur sent word of his intentions, her father gladly gave his blessing, for Arthur had once aided him in battle and returned his kingdom. The wedding was held in Camelot with all the splendor of myth. Nobles and knights gathered from every corner of Britain. The ceremony, blessed by the archbishop and attended by the Lady of the Lake herself, marked not just a union of man and woman, but of king and realm. As a wedding gift, King Leodegrance sent Arthur a great round table, once used by ancient knights of old. It became the very heart of Camelot's court. The round table, where equality reigned and no seat stood above another. Guinevere became queen with dignity and grace, beloved by her people. Yet even in celebration, quiet tension stirred. Lancelot, now a celebrated knight, stood silently among the guests, his eyes resting upon the queen with longing unspoken. The tale of Camelot, though radiant, was already laced with shadow. Still, in that moment of joy, hope reigned. Arthur and Guinevere stood hand in hand as king and queen, symbols of a united realm. Topic: shining at the height of their legend. As Camelot grew in honor and legend, so too did the tales of its knights. Among the first and most loyal was Sir Gawain, nephew of King Arthur and son of King Lot. Though once torn by his father's rebellion, Gawain chose loyalty over legacy, pledging his sword to Arthur's vision of justice. Tiphys. But Gawain did not come empty-handed. He arrived at Camelot bearing two swords, one forged by mortal smiths, and one gifted by a hermit of the wild north, said to gleam brighter the closer it came to dishonor. He declared that one sword would fight for the king, and the other for the weak. If either fails, he said, I shall break them both and fight with my bare hands. Arthur welcomed him warmly, embracing him not only as kin, but as a brother in purpose. Gawain's strength and loyalty would soon be tested. That very season, news reached Camelot of a band of raiders pillaging villages along the western coast. Without hesitation, Gawain led a small group of knights westward. In the shadow of cliffs and salt-laden winds, Gawain fought fiercely, not for glory, but for the helpless. With each blow, the villagers rallied. By nightfall, the raiders had fled, and Gawain's name was etched into the hearts of the people. He returned to Camelot not with trophies, but with rescued children riding his horse and peasants blessing his name. Arthur watched with pride, knowing that Camelot's strength came not just from swords, but from the hearts that wielded them. Sir Gawain had passed his test. His vow stood unbroken. One evening, as twilight kissed the spires of Camelot, Merlin withdrew from the royal court and climbed the hill of Glastonbury Tor, his staff tapping softly against the stones. The sky turned violet, and stars blinked into life. The great wizard, weary from shaping the future, sought answers in the silence of the earth. There, in a circle of standing stones, Merlin entered a trance. The wind whispered ancient secrets, and the veil between present and future parted. In his vision, he saw both glory and ruin, a shining kingdom crumbling under betrayal, and a once noble knight casting down the very throne he once swore to protect. He saw Arthur, older, wearier, bleeding beneath a blackened sky. He saw a broken crown, a shattered sword, and a white-shrouded boat vanishing into the mists of Avalon. When he awoke, Merlin's face was pale. He returned to Camelot, but he spoke little of what he had seen. Only Arthur, in the stillness of the royal gardens, heard the whisper of prophecy. Your reign will shine brighter than any before, Merlin said. But even stars must fall. Arthur, though troubled, did not falter. Then let it shine while it may, he answered, for Britain deserves light. From that day, Merlin grew quieter, more watchful. He spent long hours in scrolls and shadows, preparing for futures that had yet to come. For though fate could not always be changed, perhaps it could be guided. The Golden Age had begun, but so too had the threads of its undoing. As the new year dawned, Camelot held a great feast, banquets stretching for days, fires blazing in every hearth, and joy echoing through the halls. Laughter rang beneath the vaulted ceilings, until the great doors swung open with a thunderous groan, and all fell silent. A single rider entered the hall, towering, cloaked in emerald armor, his horse the color of moss and forest. He carried no weapon but a great axe on his back. His skin was green as leaves, and his eyes glowed with unnatural calm. "I am the Green Knight," he bellowed, "and I come with a game." He challenged Arthur's knights, deliver one blow with his axe, but accept in turn the same blow a year and a day. Hence, a strange silence fell, until Sir Gawain stepped forward. "I will strike," he said, "and face what follows." With one mighty swing, Gawain severed the Green Knight's head, but to everyone's horror, the knight did not fall. He rose, picked up his own head, and smiled. "A year and a day. Seek me in the Green Chapel." With that, he rode out, leaving awe and dread behind. Arthur praised Gawain's courage, but the weight of the bargain hung heavy on the court. Gawain, ever honorable, vowed to keep his word when the time came. Thus began a tale of strange magic, honor, and temptation. The Green Knight's challenge was not just a test of strength, but of soul. As the days turned and the seasons passed, the time drew near for Sir Gawain to fulfill his solemn vow to the Green Knight. True to his honor, Gawain donned his armor, took only his sword and shield, and departed Camelot under a gray winter sky. The court bid him farewell with heavy hearts, for all feared the journey would end in death. The road was long and treacherous. Gawain rode through haunted forests where trees whispered secrets, crossed frozen rivers beneath skies of iron, and faced beasts born of nightmare. Yet never did he stray from his path. One stormy night, he came upon a strange castle nestled deep within the forest. There, he was welcomed by a courteous lord and his enchanting lady. For days he rested, warmed by the fire, and tested by temptation. The lady, beautiful and cunning, sought to seduce Gawain with flattery and charm, while her husband hunted in the woods. Each day Gawain resisted, though not without hesitation. He accepted only a green sash from the lady, a gift said to protect him from harm. That he kept secret. When at last he reached the Green Chapel, Gawain knelt before his foe. The Green Knight raised his axe, but did not kill him. Instead he revealed the truth, the castle, the lady, the test. All were enchantments. Gawain's only failure had been hiding the sash. Ashamed, Gawain returned to Camelot. Yet Arthur and the knights received him with honor, not judgment. For in truth, Gawain had proven his virtue in a trial far greater than steel. A trial of the heart, while the glory of Camelot spread far and wide. Danger stirred not from outside its walls, but from within the bloodline of Arthur himself. In a hidden tower cloaked in shadow and ivy, the enchantress Morgan le Fay, Arthur's half-sister, watched Camelot with cold, glating eye. Born of the same mother as Arthur but raised far from the court, Morgan was gifted in sorcery and tutored by dark forces who twisted her bitterness into vengeance. She believed Arthur had stolen the throne that should have been hers, or at the very least, hers to influence. And so, she plotted. Morgan disguised herself as a healer and entered the court under false pretense. None recognized her as Arthur's kin. With gentle words and subtle spells, she crept close to the king's inner circle. She earned the trust of Queen Guinevere and sowed doubts in the hearts of several knights. Her greatest ploy came when she presented Arthur with a gift, a jeweled scabbard, enchanted to preserve life. But secretly, she forged a false copy, cursed to drain his strength instead. Before she could carry out her betrayal, Merlin, ever watchful, uncovered her deception. He confronted Morgan in the moonlit corridors of the castle. Spells clashed like steel, and in the end, Morgan was forced to flee on a shadowy horse that vanished into mist. Though the kingdom was safe, for now, the court had been shaken. Trust, once broken, is hard to restore. And Arthur, now aware of the sibling he never knew, carried a new burden. From afar, Morgan vowed to return. The shadows had spoken, and Camelot would never be the same. The golden peace of Camelot began to tremble, not from war or sorcery, but from whispers in the shadows. Queen Guinevere, long admired for her grace and virtue, became the center of courtly rumors. Her quiet glances with Sir Lancelot, her sworn protector, had not gone unnoticed. Love, silent, forbidden, and fierce, had taken root. When Sir Meleagrance, a jealous and ambitious knight, accused Guinevere of treason and adultery, the court gasped. By law, she was to stand trial, not in a court of words but of arms. Only a champion fighting on her behalf could prove her innocence. If no knight appeared, she would be sentenced to death. The court fell silent. The tension was unbearable. But on the eve of the trial, Lancelot burst into the arena, armor dented from riding day and night through ambushes set by Meleagrance's men. "I stand for the queen," he declared. In the duel that followed, Lancelot fought like a lion defending its pride. Meleagrance, though skilled, was no match. He fell, defeated, and confessed his lies. Guinevere was spared. Though justice was done, something had changed. Arthur, noble and silent, said nothing, but his eyes betrayed a deep sadness. He had always trusted both Lancelot and Guinevere. Now a crack had formed in the foundation of Camelot. The queen remained at Arthur's side. Lancelot resumed his place at the round table. But the tale of that trial, and the bond between knight and queen, would echo through the corridors of history, carrying both tragedy and truth. One spring morning, as light filtered through the stained glass of Camelot's chapel, a miracle unfolded before the knights of the round table. A blinding radiance filled the hall, soft and warm like sunlight through clouds. At its center appeared a golden chalice, veiled in white silk and floating mid-air. All fell silent. The air smelled of myrrh and roses. Merlin, summoned from his tower, approached the vision with reverence. "It is the Holy Grail," he said. "The sacred cup of Christ, lost to time and guarded by divine will. It has chosen to reveal itself to you." The vision vanished, but the fire it ignited remained. Inspired and awestruck, Arthur's knight swore an oath to seek the Grail. Sir Percival, innocent and pure of heart, led the vow. Galahad, Lancelot's secret son raised in seclusion, stepped forward next, his presence angelic, his purpose unknown until now. Others followed, Bors, Gawain, and even Lancelot, though a shadow crossed his face as he pledged. Arthur watched with pride and dread. He knew that the Grail was no ordinary relic. It was a divine test. "Many will ride," Merlin warned, "but only the worthy shall return." The hall emptied as knights rode out, banners fluttering, hearts full of hope. The round table, once whole, was scattered like seeds into the wind. The quest for the Holy Grail had begun. It would become the greatest and most tragic of all their adventures. Of all who rode in search of the Holy Grail, none shone more brightly than Sir Galahad. Though newly arrived at Camelot, he bore the grace of a saint and the strength of a lion. His sword never wavered, yet he drew it only in defense. Lancelot, though proud of the son he had never raised, watched with a father's awe and a knight's sorrow, for in Galahad he saw the man he could never be. Galahad's armor gleamed white beneath the sun, and his shield bore a red cross upon a field of silver. He rode alone, guided by dreams and symbols that others could not see. In his presence, the world itself seemed to hush. In a ruined chapel, Galahad defeated 7 dark knights who had defiled a sacred altar. In a desert village, he healed a blind woman with only a touch. He was not just a knight. He was a vessel of divine purpose. At the Castle of the Maidens, where warriors had failed for decades to lift a cruel siege, Galahad appeared and single-handedly broke the curse. The people wept and named him the Holy Knight, yet Galahad did not seek praise. He slept under stars, prayed before every meal, and asked nothing but guidance from above. Visions led him forward, one of a silver boat that would carry the true Grail Knight beyond mortal shores. Back in Camelot, Arthur heard tales of Galahad's deeds and felt both pride and foreboding. Merlin said little, but his eyes grew darker with each story. For it was clear now Galahad had not come merely to join the table. He had come to surpass it. As Galahad's name rose in legend, Sir Lancelot, once the greatest of Arthur's knights, rode alone, haunted not by monsters, but by his own heart. His love for Queen Guinevere, long buried under oaths and silence, burned brighter with each mile. And with it came guilt. Though brave in battle, Lancelot feared the truth he carried. He sought the Grail not just to prove his worth, but to cleanse his soul. His journey led him to a hidden abbey in the mountains, where monks spoke of a relic housed deep beneath the earth. There, Lancelot was tested, not by sword or sorcery, but by a dream. He dreamed of the Grail, shining before him, but as he reached out, it vanished, and a voice said, "You must let go of sin to receive the light." Awakening, Lancelot was visited by a spirit cloaked in silver mist, a divine messenger. It told him he could not find the Grail while his heart was divided. That night, Lancelot wept beside a river. He did not know how to let go of Guinevere, nor did he wish to. He loved her with a love deeper than loyalty, yet heavier than any armor. Still, he pressed onward. But when he finally came upon the edge of a sacred glade, where the Grail had briefly appeared to Galahad by an invisible force, he fell to his knees, overwhelmed. A voice whispered, "Not for you." Lancelot had been judged, not unworthy of courage, but unworthy of purity. He returned to his horse, silent and changed. He had glimpsed heaven, but could not enter. While Lancelot wrestled with guilt and Galahad soared with grace, Sir Percival wandered through lands where dreams and reality blurred. Ever faithful and honest, Percival was pure of heart but young in mind. He believed the Grail could be found with good deeds and bravery alone, but the quest would test more than his sword. In a twilight forest, he came upon a crumbling castle with no door, only a whispering voice that called his name. Inside, he found a wounded king upon a stone bed, pale and silent. At his side stood the Holy Grail, veiled in golden light. Percival stared, but said nothing. He wanted to ask the king's name, the meaning of the vision, what help he could offer, but he was afraid to break the silence. So he watched, and when the vision faded, he was left with regret. Later, an old hermit found him and said, "That was the Fisher King, keeper of the Grail. You were meant to ask. Only by questioning the pain of others can you bring healing." Shamed, Percival realized that silence, even when reverent, can be a sin. He had failed, not by acting wrongly, but by doing nothing. Determined to redeem himself, he continued his journey. He crossed burning plains, scaled icy cliffs, and fasted for days. At last he found peace not in action, but in understanding. He would not see the Grail again. Not yet. But he would return one day, wiser. Percival had learned that the Grail was not just a cup. It was a question waiting to be asked, as storms roared over distant mountains and kingdoms mourned knights who would never return. One figure pressed onward, Sir Galahad, purest of heart and destined from birth. Guided by visions and a light only he could see, Galahad reached the edge of the mortal world. There, on a rocky shore, where the sea met the sky, he found a silver boat without oars, waiting silently. He stepped in, alone, and it drifted into the mists, vanishing from the eyes of men. The boat carried Galahad to a shining island, neither of earth nor heaven. In its center stood a radiant temple of white stone. Inside, veiled in golden light and surrounded by angelic guardians, rested the Holy Grail. As Galahad approached, his eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of joy. The Grail revealed not riches or power, but truth. The great unity of all life, the music of the divine, and the stillness beyond war and pride. Galahad no longer desired the world of men. He drank from the Grail. Light surrounded him. In Camelot, Arthur awoke from a dream and wept, for he knew Galahad had passed beyond. Angels bore Galahad's soul upward, and the Grail was taken from the world, hidden until a time of need. The quest was over. The knights who returned, Percival, Bors, were forever changed. They had not claimed the Grail, but had touched its shadow. Their silence said more than any tale. Camelot would never be the same. The brightest flame had burned, and now a long shadow would follow. But for one moment, in time, the divine had walked among men. The quest for the Holy Grail had ended, but its cost was heavy. Of all the knights who departed, only Sir Percival and Sir Bors returned. Their armor was worn, their eyes changed. They carried no treasures, only silence and stories that few could understand. When they rode through the gates of Camelot, the people gathered in awe. King Arthur welcomed them with honor, but his heart weighed heavy. Of the once glorious Round Table, many chairs now stood empty. Percival retired to a monastery, seeking peace in prayer and contemplation. Bors returned to his duties, but spoke little of what he had seen. Only one message he shared freely: the Grail is not for kings or warriors. It is for the soul that asks, not the sword that strikes. Arthur called a great feast to honor the fallen. Portraits of the missing knights were hung in the Hall of Memory. Even Lancelot, though absent, was praised. Guinevere wept at the tales of Galahad, her heart divided between sorrow and pride. Merlin, seated beside Arthur, spoke softly. The age of glory fades. The age of reckoning begins. Though Camelot still stood, something intangible had passed. The unity that once defined the Round Table had been tested and found wanting. But Arthur, ever the hopeful king, rose to speak. We have lost many, but their purpose endures. Let us guard what remains. The court cheered, but the shadows had lengthened. The quest was over, but the cracks in the realm had deepened. Destiny was not done with Camelot. A golden age had passed. The twilight had begun. As peace returned to Camelot, a dark seed was quietly sown, one that would one day tear the kingdom apart. In a time before Arthur knew his true heritage, in the fog of youthful ambition and mystical deceit, he had lain unknowingly with his half-sister, Morgan Le Fay, who had disguised herself with powerful enchantments. From that union, a child was born in secret, Mordred. Morgan raised the boy in the shadows, whispering of destiny and betrayal. "Your father cast us aside," she would say, One day you will take his throne, not in glory, but in justice. Mordred grew into a child of sharp intellect and cold ambition. He studied magic, politics, and the weaknesses of men. His heart knew no warmth, only purpose to overthrow the man whose blood he shared, yet had never known. When word of the child reached Merlin, the wizard grew pale. He revealed to Arthur the truth of Mordred's birth and prophesied, "This boy will bring ruin to your realm. He is both your son and your doom." Arthur, torn with grief and guilt, tried to find the child, but Morgan hid Mordred beyond his reach. Some say Arthur ordered that all infants born on a certain day be cast to sea to prevent the prophecy. If true, it was a mark that even noble kings can falter. Years passed. Mordred grew in secret, taught by Morgan, shaped not by kindness, but by vengeance. Camelot, unaware, basked in fading light. But the shadow had begun to grow, the serpent was stirring, and it bore the blood of the king, though the Holy Grail had departed the world, and Camelot remained whole in stone, the spirit of unity was fading. Suspicion took root, and loyalty frayed under the strain of pride and secrecy. Among the knights of the Round Table was Sir Gawain, brother to Gawain, but unlike his noble sibling, Gawain was bitter and calculating. Jealous of Lancelot's fame and resentful of Guinevere's influence over Arthur, he watched and waited. Rumors had long swirled of the Queen's love for Lancelot, whispers that once might have been ignored, but Gawain fed them, twisting gossip into poison. He approached Arthur with trembling righteousness, claiming to have proof of the Queen's betrayal. Arthur, torn between doubt and devotion, demanded caution. "Bring me truth," he said, "not rumor." Eager for vengeance and glory, Gawain laid a trap. One night, with a band of armed knights, he stormed Guinevere's private chambers, where Lancelot had indeed come, drawn not by lust, but by aching love and guilt. Caught between chivalry and chaos, Lancelot fought back, cutting down several knights in his desperate escape. Gawain fell, mortally wounded, his plan fulfilled in death. Camelot awoke to scandal, blood, and betrayal. Arthur was devastated. His closest friend had become his greatest shame. His queen stood accused. His court was fractured. The dream of unity cracked under the weight of truth. Merlin warned, "The fall has begun." The Round Table, once a circle of trust, had been broken, not by war or sorcery, but by the hearts of those within. The winds of fate blew cold through Camelot. The court, once bound by brotherhood and chivalry, now trembled with shame and uncertainty. Queen Guinevere, once the radiant symbol of Arthur's golden reign, now stood accused of treason for her love with Sir Lancelot, the king's greatest knight. Though Arthur's heart shattered at the thought, law demanded justice. By the code of the realm, a queen convicted of betrayal must die by fire. Torn between love and duty, Arthur pronounced the sentence, not with fury, but with sorrow so deep it echoed through the stone halls. Guinevere was led through the city in white robes, her face serene yet pale. Crowds gathered in silence. Some wept, others turned away. Atop the pyre she stood tall, not pleading, not defiant, but accepting. Then came thunder, not from the sky, but from hooves. Coat Lancelot, clad in silver, charged through the guards like a storm unleashed. With sword and shield, he cut through those who stood in his path, not out of hatred, but of desperation. He reached the stake as the flames were lit, and swept Guinevere into his arms. The rescue was swift, but not bloodless. In the chaos, Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, unarmed and innocent, were slain. They were Gawain's brothers. Lancelot vanished with the queen. Arthur stood at the gates, silent. and Sir Gawain, stricken with grief, swore revenge, not against Arthur, but against the man who had once been like a brother. Camelot's heart was broken. A single moment of love had sparked a fire no sword could extinguish. Root. And thus began the war that would end the dream of the Round Table. With the escape of Guinevere and the deaths of Gareth and Gaheris, the fragile unity of Camelot finally collapsed. Sir Gawain, once the heart of the Round Table, now swore vengeance. His grief turned to fury, and he demanded war against Lancelot, his brother's killer and the Queen's rescuer. Arthur, though reluctant, could not ignore the storm rising within his kingdom. Torn between love, justice, and honor, he prepared for war, not against invaders, but against his own. Lancelot had fled with Guinevere to Joyous Gard, his northern stronghold. There he fortified his walls, not to conquer, but to protect the woman he loved. "I will not raise my sword against Arthur," he vowed, "but I will not let Guinevere burn." Gawain, blind to reason, pressed Arthur to act. The king, with a heavy heart, led an army north. What followed was not a swift battle, but a drawn-out siege between friends who had once shared the same table, the same dreams. Gawain challenged Lancelot to single combat. The two fought for hours beneath the grey sky. Clashing blades, bruised pride, and old memories between each strike. Lancelot refused to kill Gawain, but each time Gawain rose again, neither side claimed victory. And so the war dragged on, consuming once noble hearts. Camelot, once a symbol of light and brotherhood, now watched its greatest heroes turned enemies. Merlin wept in silence. Arthur sat in his tent, staring into the flames, asking where it had all gone wrong. The Round Table, once a perfect circle, now lay cracked and bleeding as Arthur's army laid siege to Joyous Gard. A darker threat arose in the heart of Camelot. With the king gone, Mordred, now a grown man and a knight, was left to govern the kingdom. Though outwardly loyal, he had long waited for this moment. He declared false news. Arthur had fallen in battle, never to return. With the court stunned and leaderless, Mordred seized the throne and crowned himself king of Britain. To solidify his power, he made a shocking proclamation. He would marry Queen Guinevere, uniting the royal bloodline under his rule. Guinevere, now separated from Lancelot and in hiding, was horrified. She fled to the Tower of London, locking herself away and refusing to be taken. She sent word across the land, "Arthur lives, Mordred lies." When news of Mordred's betrayal reached Arthur in the north, the king's heart broke anew. "I have fought my brothers," he said, "but now I must fight my son." He immediately abandoned the siege of Lancelot's fortress and made peace. Lancelot, though torn, honored Arthur's pain and withdrew from Britain, leaving Guinevere behind. Arthur turned south, gathering what loyal knights remained. The kingdom he had built, the dreams he had shared with his knights, now stood at the brink of ruin. Merlin, watching from afar, whispered, "The final war has come." The stage was set for the last battle, not over love nor glory, but over the very soul of Britain. Mordred had thrown the sword into the heart of the realm. And Arthur would answer. Arthur returned to Britain with fire in his heart and sorrow in his soul. Mordred's treachery had turned son against father, kingdom against king. As Arthur's ship approached the white cliffs of Dover, he saw the banners of his own crown flying above an army not loyal to him, but to the usurper. The final war had begun. Arthur's forces, weary but determined, landed on the beach at dawn. Mordred, clad in black armor, awaited with legions of knights. He had poisoned with lies and promises of power. The sands turned red as father and son met in battle. Sir Gawain, still loyal to Arthur despite his grief over Gareth and Gaheris, led the charge. But the wounds from his duels with Lancelot had never healed. Struck down in the fray, Gawain was carried from the field, his lifeblood soaking the white shores. Before he died, he begged Arthur to write a letter of peace to Lancelot. "Tell him I forgive him," Gawain whispered. "Tell him, come back." Britain needs him. Arthur held Gawain's hand until the last breath left his body. The king's rage burned brighter than any torch. He rallied his knights and drove back Mordred's forces. But the cost was devastating. Friends fell on both sides. Dover, once the gateway to the kingdom, was now its graveyard. Arthur stood on the cliffs as night fell, the wind tearing at his cloak. The sea below whispered of endings. Camelot was bleeding. The round table was shattered. And Mordred still lived. After the bloodshed at Dover, Arthur's army camped near Salisbury Plain, where the ancient stones stood like sentinels. The wind was sharp, and the ground cold with omen. The king, weary and burdened, could not sleep. That night he sought counsel from Merlin, who had grown gaunt and distant. His magic faded with the kingdom. "Do not go to battle tomorrow," Merlin whispered. "Fate has drawn its blade." Arthur, restless, retired to his tent. There, he was overcome by a dream more vivid than life itself. He stood on a narrow bridge, stretched over black waters. Beneath him swirled countless arms, clutching, pulling the lost souls of fallen knights. At the far end of the bridge stood a shining figure, Galahad, radiant and silent, holding the Holy Grail. "Do not fight," Galahad said. "Make peace." Blood only feeds the dark. Arthur awoke in a sweat, heart pounding. At dawn he gathered his commanders. "If Mordred will speak, I will speak," he declared. A message was sent offering a truce meeting between the two kings. But treachery was thick in the air. Both sides agreed to meet with swords sheathed. Yet each swore that if a sword was drawn, battle would resume instantly. As the two sides met under a truce flag, a knight was startled by a snake and instinctively drew his blade. That single flash of steel broke the world. The battle horns sounded. Shouts rose like thunder. Truce turned to massacre. Arthur watched his dream unravel before his eyes. The last battle had begun. Not by destiny, but by fear. The field at Camelot became a grave for legends. As the accidental spark ignited battle, brother turned on brother, and knights who once sat side by side at the round table now fell beneath each other's swords. The land itself seemed to cry out. In the heart of the chaos, Arthur and Mordred met for the final time. The king, bloodied but unyielding, charged through the melee to find the son who had betrayed him. Mordred waited at the hill's edge, his black armor glinting like a raven's wing, his eyes filled not with fear, but triumph. The two clashed with a fury unmatched. Mordred struck first, wounding Arthur's side. The king roared in pain, then drove Excalibur deep into Mordred's chest. The usurper screamed, impaled, but with his last breath, he thrust his blade upward, piercing Arthur's side. Mordred fell dead. Arthur, staggering and broken, was carried from the battlefield by Sir Bedivere, one of the last knights left alive. Around them the field lay silent, soaked in the blood of 1,000 dreams. Arthur knew his wound was mortal. "Take me to the water," he whispered. To Avalon, at a quiet lake under moonlight, Bedivere laid his king down. Arthur handed him Excalibur. "Return it to the lake. It must not remain in this world," Bedivere obeyed. As he cast the sword into the still waters, a hand rose from the lake, caught the blade, and vanished beneath the surface. Arthur smiled faintly. A barge appeared from the mist, steered by 3 queens in black, veiled and silent. They took Arthur aboard. Sir Bedivere fell to his knees as the barge drifted away. The once and future king had passed into legend. The barge drifted silently through the silver mist, bearing the wounded Arthur into the land of myth. Avalon, the sacred isle, where time stands still and healing begins. Here the air shimmered with enchantment. The waters glowed like moonlight, and the trees whispered secrets in an ancient tongue. The three queens, guardians of fate, laid Arthur upon a bed of crystal and moss in a temple of white marble. Around him the silence deepened. Not death, but slumber. Avalon was not of this world, nor entirely beyond it. Some say it lies in the west, past the setting sun. Others believe it exists in the soul of Britain, waiting to awaken when the land most needs its king. Merlin, now old and fading, had once spoken of this place. When Arthur falls, he shall not die, but rest, he said, until the world calls him again. When Arthur's sword, Excalibur, now returned to the Lady of the Lake, gleamed beneath Avalon's still waters, its power waiting, dormant but undiminished. Years passed, the world changed. Camelot became legend, but in the heart of Avalon, Arthur lay dreaming, his hand still clutching the hilt of a kingdom. From time to time, travelers claim to see a distant island shrouded in mist. Some hear hoofbeats echoing across the hills. A few swear they've seen a king in armor, eyes closed, but not at peace. They say he waits, not as a ghost, but as a promise, and so the tale does not end, but lingers. For Arthur is not gone. He is simply waiting, though the sword had been cast into the lake, and the king taken to Avalon. The story of King Arthur did not fade. It burned brighter with each telling. From the shattered stones of Camelot rose not ruin, but legend the people remembered. Bards sang of a boy who pulled a sword from stone, a king who ruled with honor, and knights who sought the Grail. They told of courage and betrayal, of battles fought not only with steel, but with heart. And they whispered of a promise, that Arthur would return in Britain's greatest hour of need. Sir Bedivere, the last knight, became a wandering guardian of the king's memory, passing the tale to those who still believed. Guinevere, consumed by grief and guilt, withdrew to a convent and lived in quiet penance, praying for the soul of the man she loved and the kingdom they lost. Merlin, if he still lived, disappeared into the folds of time. Some say he wanders the wilds, waiting for Arthur to awaken. Others claim he became one with the land, became one with it. His magic, now the wind in the trees and the whisper of rivers. The round table, though broken in wood, remained unbroken in spirit. Its values, justice, loyalty, truth, survived in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a better world. And still, in every age of darkness, voices rise to speak the ancient words, Stremdert once and future king. In every child who dreams of courage, in every leader who chooses justice over power, in every act of sacrifice for something greater, the spirit of Arthur stirs. For the legend does not belong to the past. It belongs to the future. And so, the tale of King Arthur lives on